It began with a smile that seemed too perfect, a gesture too well-timed, and words that flowed like honey, smooth and intoxicating. For anyone on the receiving end, it would have felt like the kind of love that movies are made of. Charming glances across a crowded room, late-night messages filled with promises of forever, and the warmth of someone who seemed to know exactly what you wanted to hear. But beneath the polished surface, there was a pattern, a rhythm of deception hidden in the smallest of details. Cheaters rarely wore their lies on their faces. Instead, they wove them into silences, half-truths, and carefully chosen words. The first signs often came not in the grand gestures, but in the inconsistencies. The late-night calls that suddenly needed to be taken in another room, the texts replied to with a hurried lock of the screen, the explanations that never seemed to line up with reality. Lies, no matter how carefully crafted, had a way of showing themselves in the pauses. A voice too defensive when questioned, a story told one way today and another tomorrow, the quiet irritation that flared up at simple curiosity. Love, genuine love, thrived in openness, but deception thrived in shadows. Those who had lived through it knew the pattern well. At first, there was a storm of affection, an intensity designed to disarm. The cheater poured themselves into every gesture, gifts, affection, constant attention, as though constructing a fortress of trust too strong to ever be questioned. But as time passed, cracks began to show. The fortress became a prison of secrets. The excuses piled higher than the affection, and the warmth of their eyes seemed to shift, even if only for a second, into the cold calculation of someone carrying a hidden truth. Trust was eroded not in one blow, but in 1,000 small cuts. The sudden need for privacy, the changing routines, the vague explanations about where they had been. Technology became both ally and enemy, phones glued to their palms, social media accounts suddenly locked down, notifications silenced under the pretense of needing space. And still, the words of love flowed, the declarations of loyalty repeated until they lost their meaning. For every lie told, another promise was offered, a distraction to keep suspicion at bay. The deception was never flawless. The human heart, no matter how practiced in deceit, stumbled when confronted with truth. A misplaced item, a name accidentally mentioned, a timeline that failed to fit, small things that might have been dismissed individually but, together, told a story of betrayal. Those who learned to listen beyond words could hear it. The stutter in a practiced alibi, the sudden over-explanation where none was needed, the shift in tone when a question brushed too close to the truth. Lies spoke loudly when one paid attention to the silence around them. For those who uncovered the truth, it was rarely the moment they had imagined. There was no grand confession, no cinematic breaking of bonds. It was instead the quiet realization that the person they had loved had built a second life in the shadows. The heart broke not because of the betrayal itself, but because of the realization that love had been weaponized, used as a mask for lies. The memories of laughter, of whispered dreams in the night, became poisoned with doubt. Were any of them real, or were they all pieces of a carefully constructed act? And yet, even in the wreckage, there was clarity. The lesson of deception was not just in the pain it caused, but in the strength it revealed. To spot a cheater's lies was not only to catch them in the act, but to reclaim the power of perception, to trust the instincts that whispered when something was wrong. The deception was theirs, but the awakening belonged to the one who saw through it. Love, when true, never hid in shadows. It did not stumble over questions or recoil from honesty. It stood firm, transparent, and unafraid of light. And so, the story of deception, while painful, became a guide, a reminder that lies may glitter for a time, but truth, no matter how quietly spoken, was always stronger. Those who endured learned to see beyond the practiced smiles and honeyed words, to listen instead to the silence, the inconsistencies, and the instinct that whispered the truth long before the mind accepted it. In the end, the deception of love was not only a tale of betrayal but of resilience, of finding strength in clarity and walking away from shadows toward something real. The lies of a cheater could wound deeply, but the truth, once seen, became a path toward freedom, a promise that love, true love, need never be built on deception again. The deception was not always loud, nor was it always easy to spot. Sometimes it unfolded like a slow poison, spreading so quietly that the victim mistook it for love itself. The lies did not come in sharp bursts of denial but in gentle deflections. "You're imagining things. You don't trust me enough. You're overthinking." These words became weapons disguised as reassurances, twisting doubt into guilt. The one who loved found themselves questioning their own instincts, silencing their inner voice for the sake of peace, and convincing themselves that suspicion was a flaw rather than a warning. It was in these moments that deception was at its most dangerous. Not when the lie was spoken, but when the lie made the listener doubt their own ability to see truth. That was the artistry of a practiced cheater, not simply hiding their betrayal but weaving a reality where the betrayed began to believe they were the problem. Arguments turned into apologies, not from the guilty but from the innocent, who clung to the hope that love could still be saved. But lies, like cracks in glass, only spread wider under pressure. The patterns became harder to hide, the sudden absences explained with flimsy excuses, the shifting priorities that no longer placed love at the center, the vague promises of a future that never seemed to arrive. Even the tone of their affection shifted, becoming hollow, mechanical, as if repeating words that once carried weight but now rang empty. A kiss that lingered too long with guilt, a hug that felt distracted, a laugh that no longer reached the eyes. These became the quiet confessions of someone living a double life. And when the truth did finally break through, it was rarely from a single discovery. Sometimes it came from a slip of the tongue, a text meant for someone else, a name spoken in sleep. Other times it was a confession pulled out not by guilt, but by the inevitability of being caught. Yet no matter how the truth revealed itself, the pain was always the same. The shattering of trust, the realization that the foundation of love had been nothing more than fragile glass painted to look like stone. The aftermath was its own kind of battlefield. The cheater might beg, weaving new promises, or they might retreat into cold indifference, revealing how little the love had truly meant to them. The betrayed was left with memories now tainted, nights replayed in the mind with new questions. Was that moment real? Was that smile genuine? Or had it all been part of the illusion? The cruelty of deception was not just in the act itself, but in how it rewrote the past, stealing not only the future, but the certainty of what had already been lived. And yet, even amidst the ashes, there was growth. The one who endured learned to read people differently, to spot the tremors in a voice, the inconsistencies in a story, the eyes that darted away at the wrong moment. They became sharper, stronger, not because they wanted to, but because pain had carved wisdom into their bones. The cheater might have taken love, but they could not take resilience. In the end, the greatest deception was not in the lie itself, but in the illusion that it could last forever. Lies, no matter how carefully tended, eventually withered in the light of truth. And when they did, the one who had been betrayed walked away not weaker, but freer, no longer chained to shadows, but open to a love that did not need to hide.